It's completely normal to feel grief following the diagnosis of your child because even though your child is still alive, you're going to go through a grieving process as you mourn the loss of the typically developing child that you thought you had. But the good news is you don't need to stay stuck in grief. Your life and the life of your child can be one filled with joy regardless of their diagnosis. Hi, I'm Kelly Mantone, the founder of Accepting the Gift, a ministry for Catholic special needs parents. And I know the grief that you're going through all too well. I went through it myself twice. First, when my middle son was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, and then when his younger brother was diagnosed with the same thing less than 2 years later. And that was by far the darkest time of my life. And back then, I didn't think that I would ever feel joy or happiness or just even be able to smile again. And I assumed that my sons would have short, miserable lives. But I can tell you now, 13 years later, that that is not the case at all. My life is the exact opposite of what I thought it would be. And so I'm going to tell you today how I moved through those stages of grief to become a stronger and more joyful parent. There are 5 stages to grief: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, and depression. You'll probably go through all those phases in that order, but you might linger in one stage longer than another, or you might kind of go back and forth between them. And that's okay, that's perfectly normal. Grief isn't really a linear process, and everyone's journey through it is completely different. When you were blessed with your child, you probably envisioned all sorts of things for him or her, and a difficult diagnosis changes that. The future no longer looks the way you expected it to. So while you're not mourning the death of a person, you are going to mourn the loss of the life that you envisioned for your child. And while we normally associate grieving with death, most people don't realize that becoming a special needs parent will entail a similar, though not identical, process. So I'm here to reassure you that everything you're feeling is okay and normal for what you're going through. The first stage is shock. You've just been completely blindsided, probably, by your child's diagnosis, and your emotions are going to be all over the place. One minute you might feel completely numb, and the next you might just start sobbing uncontrollably for what feels like no reason. You're going to need to take some time off and step away from your responsibilities to really deal with the news of your child's diagnosis. When we look at how businesses and schools deal with the death of a loved one, they give you time off, but we don't get time off to deal with a diagnosis. So we need to kind of make time for ourselves. We need to pull ourselves away from our responsibilities. And I find it can be really helpful to designate one close friend or family member to be in charge of communicating with everybody what's going on. People are going to hear the news, they're going to ask questions, and it can just be really hard for you in that first stage of shock to keep telling people and repeating all these things over and over again. It can be really helpful if you have kind of a designated agent that can be in charge of telling people at your parish, posting things on social media on your behalf, so you can really just focus on being with your family and kind of processing the news however you need to process through this first stage of shock. It can also be really helpful to have that same person or someone else come with you to some of those first few doctor appointments and gather the information and take notes for you, because your mind probably isn't going to be there and you're going to have a hard time remembering those things down the road. So it can be really helpful to have other people doing things for you during that initial shock period. The next stage is denial. It can be really hard to accept a medical diagnosis for our child and the limitations that are going to come with that diagnosis. And it can be easy to convince ourselves that somehow a test is wrong, or this won't happen, or this won't apply to my child, or they'll just outgrow it, or we'll find a cure on our own through some alternative treatment, or we'll scan all these drug trials for some super miracle drug that will fix everything and get them back to normal. We equate disabled with bad, and so we refuse to allow this term or any label to be attached to our child. And while we should never give up fighting for our child to receive the best care and treatment, we need to accept that we are not in control of the situation. When we are in denial, we are preventing ourselves from seeing that a joyful life is possible with our child, even if it looks completely different from the life we might have envisioned for them and our family. Rather than settle into denial, we need to step out in faith and hope. And even when the future seems scary and uncertain, we need to trust that God is in control no matter what. Next up, anger. You'll probably recognize this phase more than the other ones. I think what's most surprising is what's going to trigger your anger during this time. People would say the most well-meaning and innocent things to me, and I would just get so filled with rage. And I'm an extrovert, but I really had to avoid people, even very close friends and social gatherings, because people were always saying things that were just setting me off. And I was bottling up that anger so I wouldn't explode in the moment. And then I was exploding later at my children or my husband or in like really random circumstances where it wasn't appropriate. So you need to try to get your anger out in really healthy ways, like exercising, running, jumping rope, something active. I really punched at my pillow on my bed a lot to try to get it out. And if you do explode at other people, apologize. Everybody should be really understanding that you're not yourself right now. Again, think about it. When someone dies, nobody questions how the family is reacting. They understand they're going through a really difficult period. So extend yourself the same grace that you would extend to someone else who was going through a grieving process. Don't get stuck in anger. You can feel really justified, and the world will tell you you're justified in being angry with God and being angry with the situation and how life isn't fair. But being angry and holding on to that anger isn't going to make for a joyful life for you or your child. So be honest when anger rears its ugly head that, yeah, this isn't fair and it kind of sucks sometimes. But then work on getting to peace. Get the anger out and move on, okay? Adoration and confession are wonderful sacraments for this, and they made a huge, huge impact in me getting over my own issues with anger, since I'm naturally disposed to having a pretty hot temper anyway. I can't recommend going to those sacraments in particular enough, as well as continuing to please go to Mass as much as you're able to, even if you are angry with God and not feeling like it. It will give you the grace to keep going and be honest with God that you need help with some of these stages, because He's going to work with you. Next up is bargaining. Don't fall into the trap of thinking you can bargain with God for a different outcome. In my book, I mention hostage negotiations. We're so prone to, well, God, I promise to do this if you just do this for me. And, oh, please, I'll do this and this if you just do this. Your child's diagnosis isn't your fault. And while God can certainly cure your child if that's His will, He might know that your family doesn't need a cure for your child and your family to be happy and live out His plans for you. So you have to learn to trust in God, not reason with Him. You can certainly ask, like our Lord, that this chalice pass you or your child by, but if it doesn't, don't miss the opportunity to love and enjoy the child you have right in front of you. Finally, there's depression, and you can really stay stuck in this stage for a long time, and you may need professional help to get yourself out of it, and that's perfectly okay. You shouldn't hesitate to do anything that's going to help you to be the best parent and caregiver that you can be for your child. We need to recognize that it's completely normal to feel depression as part of the grieving process. It's not something you need to snap yourself out of, okay? You have to work through it and allow yourself to work through it. It's going to be the last hurdle before you reach acceptance, and it might be the hardest one for you to get over. So confide in friends, a support group. Make sure you continue to go to the sacraments. And if at any point a friend, family member, or your pastor recommends that you seek professional help, I highly encourage you to do so. I wish I could say it will last so many months, it will last so many weeks, but everybody's journey is different. But just recognize that depression is something that you will have to work through. But if it seems like it's going on for too long, and especially if you're not able to meet your basic needs, you're not eating, you're not taking care of yourself, you're struggling to get up, if you're showing signs of regular depression, it doesn't hurt to go and speak with a professional. After all those stages, you're going to be emotionally spent and exhausted. But when you work through all of them, you're finally going to be able to arrive at acceptance. And there may be times down the road, especially following a setback in your child's health, when you might feel one of these things again, denial, anger, or bargaining, but recognize it as a temporary setback. You know you've gone through this, you know you can overcome it, you can overcome that again. It's just minor, it's just a little bump, it's not your new normal. Acceptance starts with the choice to leave the grieving process behind. And acceptance doesn't mean that you're resigned to living this dreary life. It means you know that your life is going to be okay, even if it looks different from how you envisioned it would look. And in fact, I'm here to tell you your life is going to be better than okay. Your life will be filled with joy if you can trust that God's plan, whatever it may be, is going to be good. Now, this plan may still include things that are hard, disappointing, and there might even be some sadness. But life with your child can be just as wonderful as anything you envisioned, even with this diagnosis. And every day, I encourage you, look for the joy. Look for the things that you can be thankful for. What things make your child happy? What makes them smile? What brings them comfort? Thank God for those blessings. And when you look for things to be thankful for every day, even the little things, you'll soon start to see more of those blessings in your life instead of just the challenges. I no longer see my son's diagnosis as the problem. They don't think there's anything wrong with themselves, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with them. They're made just the way God wants them to be, and whatever plan God has for them, I know that my sons can live it out in the way that God's created them. And they're joyful, and I'm joyful, and we have a joyful family. And I'll be honest, it took me a long time to get here. But now that I'm on the other side of grief, I can see how the struggle and going through all those things has made me a stronger. It's made me more thankful, and it's improved my relationship with God. And I say that as someone who could not pray for quite a few years, and who was really ruled by anger for a long time. So know that if I can overcome these things and get to this point, I know that you can too, and that I'm going to pray for you to get there as well. If you want more information on overcoming grief and how to thrive in your vocation as a special needs parent, I invite you to check out my book, Better Than Okay, Finding Joy as a Special Needs Parent, which I have linked below. I also encourage you to join our online Facebook group. So if you are struggling, there's other parents there you can chat with and support each other, because we've all been there and we know what you're going through. We can help you. So I hope this video has helped answer some of your questions and helped reassure you that whatever you're feeling is completely normal. And please, please allow yourself to work through all these stages of grief as you come to terms with your child's diagnosis. So until next time, check out this next video for more information, and I'll see you then.